to New York because of delayed airport openings, and they completed 147 flights. Delta's typical 2,500 flights, 467 completed Thursday, 1,200 flying Friday. But this ground stop is not really the only issue for the airlines. Now, the new FAA guidelines for safety also have a great cost in personnel, and labor for the airlines is very expensive.
Right now, the airlines are looking at all these rules saying, well, how do we restart our operations when we have all these new rules to cope with?
Now, commercial airline pilots also serve in the reserves, and we have these numbers. 50,000 reservists are approved for active duty. 3,500 will be in the initial wave. 13,000 are for Air Force duty, and Air National Guard pilots are needed to man the fighter jets that the Pentagon has put on alert nationwide.
We've had people who are knocking on the doors seeking to help. They want to serve. They want to be a part of this. They're very emotional.
Now, United says some of their employees have been activated. Delta says they're sure they're going to be involved, and they're going to cope with it the same way they did in the Persian Gulf. And American, Lou, says many of their pilots do have a military background, and they are sure that they will be involved in this reserve call-up.
Just as they were in 1990 and 1991. Kitty, thank you very much. And we have, by the way, just received word that Midway Airport has just within the last few moments now reopened. Joining us now to talk about how his company is faring after these attacks, a man who runs a very large business dependent upon air travel and the operational airports around this country, is Jim Kelly. He is the chairman and the CEO of UPS. Good to have you with us. I know these are, as for almost everyone, extraordinarily difficult times. There is so much importance attached to what you do and your competitors, your industry, because so many companies, businesses in all areas of life depend upon your overnight services, your airmail services. What is the status first of that service tonight?
Yeah, well, first of all, Lou, I mean, our biggest concern, of course, was for our people and certainly the victims of this horrible tragedy. We extend our sympathy and our prayers to their families. We were fortunate not to lose any of the many people that we have working in that area. But our system ran pretty strong considering the circumstances. Our people work very hard. We deliver about 10 million ground packages a day and 2 million air packages a day. And with the airline down, of course, a lot of that merchandise went into our ground system. Some of that was delayed. But last night we were up and running and pretty much back to normal.
And when you say normal, pretty much back to normal, is that 80% of normal? Put a number on it for us, would you?
Well, today it'll be 95, close to 90+%. As a matter of fact, we'll be re-implementing our guarantee to our customers as of Monday. So as of Monday, we expect we'll be 100% back. We're getting our worldwide business, our international business up today and over the weekend.
And what is your best judgment about the effect on your company and others of the reservist call-up ordered by the President today?
Well, I think the American people, of course, are very resilient. I think a lot of people continue to do business this week, even during this horrible tragedy. Most business was conducted in our country this week, and I think it'll rebound fine. I think the economy, of course, was weak before the tragedy, and I think it'll improve going forward.
Okay. Jim Kelly, chairman of UPS, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We're going to go now to our Moneyline contributor, William Cohen, who is also a former defense secretary. Bill, good to have you with us.
Great to be here, Lou.
Today we witnessed a president leading this nation through, it seemed to me, two phases, declaring, as he did yesterday, a national day of mourning. You and your wife Janet, I know, were at the National Cathedral for the prayer services, and this president here with a bullhorn in his hand, talking about those who will soon hear from all of America, those who had been responsible for bringing down the walls of the World Trade Center and those other buildings. Is that right? Have we entered a new stage? Is America now engaged in war?
I think quite clearly the President has indicated acts of war have been perpetrated upon the American people. And I think he also made it quite clear that we will respond at a time and place of our choosing. And I think he's going to be very careful with his national security team to evaluate all the options available, military, diplomatic, and economic, and then seek to effectively respond to against those who have caused this. So it, in effect, is a call to arms, so to speak, to stiffen the spine of the American people, to tell them that great sacrifice has been required of them in the past, great sacrifice will be required in the future.
And let me ask you, on one front that probably a lot of people are not going to talk about, but intelligence work is going to be so critical a part of the president's war. Do you believe that the United States will be successful in tracing terrorist money through the international banking system? Is this country, in your judgment, prepared to demand that of international banks around the world?
I believe that this administration, this country, will call upon all the international community, financial and otherwise, to contribute their support to rooting out terrorism and the financial network that supports terrorist organizations. I think that the administration will call upon them, and I believe that given the international expressions of support to date, and that we have a very good chance of achieving that.
Bill Cohen, as always, thanks for being with us here. I'm Lou Dobbs. Thanks for being with us, and good night from New York.
I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. Here's a look at the latest developments at this hour. President Bush has visited the incredible ruins of the World Trade Center in New York. Surrounded by scores of rescuers and volunteers, Mr. Bush vowed that those responsible for Tuesday's attacks, quote, will hear from us soon. In return, he was greeted with thunderous cheers of USA, USA. The Justice Department in Washington identified 19 men suspected of hijacking those 4 planes on Tuesday. All are linked to the accused terrorist Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden is believed to be in Afghanistan, where the United States says he runs his terrorist operation. The U.S. Senate, followed by the House of Representatives, has approved $40 billion in emergency spending to wage war on terrorism and aid victims of Tuesday's attacks. President Bush also authorized the call-up of some 50,000 military reservists for, quote, homeland defense. Joey?
Wolf, let's continue now. Look at this hour. This is a live picture of Lower Manhattan. If you could look from Midtown down to Lower Manhattan, this is what you would see at this hour. Look a little bit closer at what is still smoldering, the ruins of the World Trade Center. Already, rescuers have removed 10,000 plus tons of debris from the big crater left of the World Trade Center. Thousands of people involved in rescue and support. You see them working away desperately in their efforts at this hour. And at this hour, there remain 4,763 people still missing, still not accounted for. And so the work does go on in New York City. Also at this hour, the airports in this nation are getting back in place, getting back and putting more planes in the sky. CNN's Maria Hinojosa is at one of them now. Maria, talk to us about the scene that you are seeing at LaGuardia at this hour.
Joey, it's been yet another frustrating day here at LaGuardia Airport. First of all, the airport has been officially open since this morning, but here at the American Airlines terminal, you can see that the gate down there is closed. And over here, at the ticket counters, just a few people, no lines at all. Beyond that, at the ATA terminal, there is a flight that I've just been told will be departing for Chicago. But again, at the American Airlines information about flights, everything pretty much is saying canceled, 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 canceled. Now, at about 11:20 today, the official ban on takeoffs and arrivals was lifted. But the first plane did not take off here until, good news, 4:30, more or less, here at LaGuardia. When the first plane started taking off, there have been sporadic takeoff and arrivals since then, mostly United and Continental flights. Now, here in the airport, though, things are really far from normal. You hear no announcements. There's nothing of those loudspeakers making announcements of when planes are going to be taking off or not. You see a lot more presence of U.S. Marshals and of police, armed customs officials, for example. But even so, given the fact that people have been stranded here for 3 to 4 days now, The mood among many of the people has been very calm. Of course, that's tempered with the fact that they have just, as all of us here, suffered through an extraordinary tragedy. So many people are saying the fact that we are here, that we can't take off for another couple of days, we are alive, and that's what's most important. In terms of pilots, there are discussions among the Airline Pilots Association to perhaps revamp regulations, perhaps fortifying cockpit doors, perhaps allowing pilots to carry firearms or stun guns. So while things have clearly changed on land, things will also change in the air. Joey?
CNN's Maria Hinojosa at LaGuardia. Now we move back to Wolf in Washington.
Thank you very much, Joey. Our Patty Davis has been checking in to see what's happening with the aviation industry. First of all, Patty, tell us what we know about those voice and flight data recorders that were recovered from that American Airlines jet that slammed into the Pentagon Tuesday morning.
Well, the National Transportation Safety Board has analyzed those. It was given those last night in conjunction with the FBI and the Justice Department. A Justice Department official tells CNN that the voice recorder on that American Airlines flight that smashed into the Pentagon was indeed, the tape on that was indeed damaged. Not sure how useful that will be to the investigation. Now, overall, though, they're hoping to get some useful information. They still have the flight data recorders that they will get information from. Wolf?
And what about the damage, the incredible damage that's being done to the U.S. Airline industry as a whole? What's happening on that front, and what's the government planning on doing about it?
Well, Congress is looking at a $2.5 billion bailout of the airline industry, really unprecedented for the airline industry. The industry itself is saying that it expects to lose worldwide about $4 billion because of the incidents this week in New York and Washington. That's on top of $6 billion because of the poor economy that the industry was already facing in losses. $10 billion total there. American Airlines, one spokesman telling me today that that certainly will help. The funds will help the airlines weather the latest crisis. Now, overall, about 2,000 airlines, according to the FAA, 2,000 flights were in the air today by midday. That's about half, 40 to 50% of what's normal. In terms of American Airlines, they said they were operating about 30% of normal schedule, including international flights. They gradually will go up to 80% of their schedule. United, 20% of normal schedule. And Delta, domestic flights, they're just saying simply will gradually resume. Now, as of 4 o'clock, the news from the Department of Transportation was that general aviation, which had been restricted, is now allowed to get back into the air. But there are certain restrictions on that. They cannot fly within 25 miles of Washington, D.C. or New York. Now, overseas carriers as well allowed to get back into the air. The FAA saying that indeed they're allowed as long as they meet all the extra security precautions that have been implemented by the FAA, as well as the airports that they're flying from. Now, in terms of airports that are still closed, Washington Reagan is still closed, at least today and tomorrow, until further notice, is what that airport is saying. Boston Logan also closed at this point, but Massport, the Port Authority there in Massachusetts, saying that that airport plans to open as of 5 a.m. Joey?
CNN's Patty Davis for us in our Washington bureau. Again, a live picture of Lower Manhattan at this hour. As we told you, 4,763 people remain unaccounted for from the World Trade Center's attack. But there are some people who are beginning to talk about their experience. Survivors who are speaking from their hospital beds. A short time ago, a victim who is now at Bellevue Hospital, treated at one of the very important emergency centers in New York City, spoke with reporters. Let's listen.
I am in. The rescuers, they found me.
And how did they get you out? What did they do?
Well, they moved the partition that was behind my back, and they pulled me out by my arms because I was facing in their direction. So they pulled me out by my arms and put me on the stretcher. No, the last thing I knew is I was holding my coworker's hand, and that's when the building fell and we lost, we went apart. I didn't hear anybody else. I didn't see anything else. That was the last thing I knew. The last thing again, I heard somebody yell help twice while I was stuck under the staircase.
One of the survivors of the World Trade Center tragedy, speaking from her hospital bed at Bellevue Hospital. in New York. Now we want to return to New York City. Richard Roth, one of our correspondents covering the president's visit to New York, to Lower Manhattan this afternoon.